You are listening to the Player Layer podcast. I'm Ivan Alexiev, and I'm super happy to have Zach and Sam with me, who are the designers of Circadians Chaos Order, which you can find a link to in the description. It's coming to Kickstarter on October 19th, and I'm very excited about this game. It's an area control game with some Euro elements. I was super happy that I got to playtest the game with them, and I got to spend quite a lot of time with the game, and I thoroughly enjoyed talking to them because they're just two wonderful guys. You'll see this is a little bit longer than usual, and I think just it was so much fun to be able to talk about game design and what this game went through, and it's very different to the Garfield games you might be used to seeing. And we got to talk about that as well and what their plans are for the game. And yeah, I just love it when I get people like this whose just work I love and who I love playing games with. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it too. So thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Zach, this is your first like game, right?
Yeah, it is. It's my first design. I have been a friend of Garfield Games for a while though, and me and Sam are really good buddies. So I did a lot of playtesting on Architects before it came out. And yeah, Sam asked me, actually, it wasn't that long after Architects came out. It would have been a year after Architects to start working on this game together, which we've been working on for a few years now.
Oh, wow. So could you give me like a pitch of the game? Because now the game is finished and it's going to Kickstarter soon. So could you tell me what the game is about? Is it linked to the first Circadians game at all? What the like main mechanisms are and stuff?
Maybe I can pitch the idea and the feelings, and Sam can pitch some of the mechanisms.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So basically, Sam and I, we love like computer games, and we used to play Age of Empires together and stuff like that. But we also have a childhood love of Risk. It was probably the first board game that I really loved, and it's probably similar for Sam. But honestly, playing modern area control games, I've never quite been satisfied. Either they're too on the kind of American side of things, rolling dice and just not much strategy at all, or else they're a little bit too on the Euro-y side of there's not really any stakes. It's just kind of like, oh, yep, he's going to win that battle. So I think what was in our heads was to create the perfect hybrid for us. I don't say the perfect hybrid because I don't want to claim anything like that, but for me and Sam, the game that was scratching that itch of being between that what people call American or Ameritrash, but I don't think they're trash games, and Euros. So that was kind of the idea. And we wanted a game where combat was important, because say like Scythe is a really amazing game, but the combat doesn't seem as important as I would want it to be in a game which would be considered area control. So I think this is kind of the basis. So maybe Sam can talk a bit more about the specifics.
Yeah, well said. Just to sort of reaffirm what you were saying, Zach and I have said that this is the game that we've always wanted to play. We're designing the game that we've always wanted to play. Maybe we didn't know that this game existed, and it existed somewhere in our minds, but this is the sort of thing that, I mean, if we were playing this growing up, we would have just spammed it so much. So this has been really, really a fun process. So there are 6 factions in this game, in Circadians Chaos Order, and this sort of takes place after Circadians First Light. The Circadians are humans who have been exploring different galaxies. They've found this beautiful planet with beautiful people. these different locals. I guess you would call them aliens, but really we're the aliens. The Circadians are the aliens. And the Circadians have brought along their artificial intelligence with them, the robots. And I mean, if you've watched any sci-fi movies, you know what happens. They've gone a little rogue, and they've sort of broken free of the human control, and they've got their own kind of agenda, and they want to try and gather all the power for themselves. So we've got two factions there, the humans, the AI, and then we've got four local factions, these different alien races, I guess, who each have their own kind of idiosyncrasies and different ways they interact with the land and with the other players. And each of these 6 factions are playable, and they each have their own way to win the game. They each have their own asymmetric kind of win condition. That idea is something which has really, really intrigued me. The design of Vast, I think a few years ago, really kind of inspired me. I was like, wow, this is such an ambitious kind of thing where there's a dragon who's trying to escape out of the cave, and there's a knight who's trying to kill the dragon, and then there's goblins who want to kill the knight, and the cave doesn't want anyone to leave, that sort of thing. Just that whole idea in game design is really exciting. And so we added to the challenge of wanting to design the game. We've always wanted to play this sort of battle game, which was a little bit Euro-y, a little bit strategic, but also a little bit of tension and threat and risk and chance, those sorts of things. And throw onto that 6 highly asymmetric factions that can win in different ways. That was the challenge of Circadians Chaos Order.
Yeah. And it's been awesome, by the way, for listeners. I've had the chance to play this game about 20 hours, and I want to play it more. Because I think you've done a wonderful job of every game kind of playing out in a different way. And I really like those different win conditions, because it's not just area control. I feel like there is the you've got basically, and correct me if if I'm wrong at any point, but you've kind of got 2 phases of the game. One where you're kind of more building up and deciding what resources you want, and kind of building up your engine and stuff. And then the other one is more the actual moving around and trying to get territories.
So I think it's important to say each faction has their unique win condition, but there's also a win condition that is for everyone, which is strictly an area control win condition, which becomes easier every round. So it becomes less, you have to control less territories every round to be able to win with the area control win condition. So even if someone is way ahead on their personal win condition, there's always a chance for everyone else to win the game. Now, in saying that, I've forgotten your question.
No,
Ivan,
it wasn't a question.
Okay, you were talking about the 2 phases.
You just bluntly interrupted me there, and
sorry, man. I just confirmed. So the first phases are action phases. Which the last action is movement, and then when you move into a territory where there's other people, then the phase after movement is resolving all of those battles.
And I think the one of the coolest things for me was that mechanic of how it becomes easier. Basically, the way that it becomes easier is you start off the very first round of the game. You've got 6 places on the map which you need to control at the end of the round in order to win the game. But then each round, one of those is taken off. So then the next round you need 5 areas. Then the next round you need 4 areas. And so around, usually what I've found is, when you get around round 4 or 5, it's very likely that like both the personal win conditions or the like area control win condition can happen, and that I think builds like a lot of really nice tension.
Yeah, totally. Like if someone isn't doing well in their own personal win condition, if they can sort of block other people from winning with their own win conditions, then they can make a play for the round 5 relic victory where there's only 2 relic regions left to hold. So you always feel like you're in it. You always feel like you've got a chance to win the game. And the other thing we did with this relic mechanism, so as Ivan said, there's 6 relics on the board. They're in these different regions. You control all those regions, you win the game. But obviously in the first round, that's just not going to happen. No one's going to be able to control 6 highly contested regions in the first round. And that's intentional. But I've played a lot of area control games where economy is important, and what ends up happening is people build up their economy for the first 3 quarters of the game, and only in the last quarter of the game do you fight each other. And it's kind of like this posturing, this threat of battle without it actually happening. You know that battle will happen at the end to resolve a winner, but there's more incentives to boost your economy elsewhere. And I didn't want a game like that. I wanted a game where people fight a lot and they fight often, because then they start to understand the combat system. They start to understand different people's power levels, and they don't get hit with this big surprise at the end. Oh, it turns out you were stronger than me? Okay. I guess I lost that whole game because we only had 1 or 2 fights in the whole game. So we didn't want that to happen. We wanted a lot of battles, and for the result of each battle not to matter heaps. That's a very New Zealand slang word. A lot, I should say. We didn't want the result of each battle to matter like a lot. We wanted them to matter a little bit, and then people have to sort of have a lot of battles throughout the game. So anyway, back to this relic system. The relic that is going to be taken away, the lowest numbered relic. So in round 1, that would be.
So it's also so sorry to interrupt. It's also the round counter for the game. So there's maximum of 6 rounds in the game, and each relic is numbered 1 to 6.
Yeah, totally right. And so at the end of round 1, the person who holds the region that with relic 1, they get to claim it, and they get to bring it back to their base. And the relic itself will give you a massive power spike towards your own personal win condition. So what this does is from round 1, it says, hey, players, you want this thing, this shiny thing. This is going to help you. Here's an incentive to fight in the first round. When everyone wants to be building up their economy, you still can do that. But hey, there's this other thing that is worth your while. Why don't you go in and have a rough and tumble over there and fight over that thing? So, yeah.
Which is pretty much what I do every game, is I go for the 50-50 chance on the relic and either get really strong or make it really hard for myself. But it's definitely something which people can choose to do or not, because if you go for that fight, it can go well for you, it can go bad for you. If you don't go for that fight, you can maybe build up strength and go for the second relic. So there's lots of decisions. There's no kind of single way to play out the match, which we thought was very important, because we don't want it to just be like, oh yeah, you have to fight for the first relic, otherwise you're going to lose the game.
Yeah. How early on do you think? And let's for me, it's something that's really interesting always is kind of seeing where the game started, or what was in your heads, other than wanting to make like a game that you'd want to play, and like a nice, I guess, just that mix that you were talking about between Ameritrash and Euro. What were the kind of first core ideas of the game, and do you think a lot of them stayed, or were there a lot of like darlings that you killed or stuff that you cut from
that? That's a great question. The initial mechanism is still in the game, although it has changed a little bit. But the initial mechanism, and this was my sort of first idea, was sort of like worker placement, but it wasn't worker placement at the time. It was this pricing mechanism. So there's a currency in the game, and there are certain actions that you want to do. So we'll just take the sort of area control tropes of, move and build and harvest and recruit and research. And each player, each round will price one of those actions. And this was actually done with cards and dice, but basically they might say, right, if you want to do recruit, you're going to have to pay me 3 of this currency. And so the tension there was pricing something high enough that you got a lot of coin, you got a lot of energy, whatever the resource was at the time, out of it. But you didn't want to price it so high that no one would pay you. And so you're sort of working this economy like you want to get a lot out of your opponents, but not too much that they just will decide to pass on the action. And and that's changed a little bit, but that's basically still in the game, this whole pricing system. And so Zach and I also say quite often that you can lose the game from having a poor kind of military presence, but you can also lose the game on the research side of it, on the economical side of it. You really have to focus on both sides of the game, the engine building, the economy, and also the military, the battles, and you can't neglect either of those.
Yeah, and we've seen in the playtesting, we've seen some people who are really good at the economic part of the game, and they get really rich and strong, but then they're not very good at the strategic area control, movement, and fighting battles part of the game, and or vice versa. There's people that have like hardly any resources, but they manage to win some battles. But the people that really do well are those people that manage to combine them too. And I think that's the reason why it's the perfect game for us, or the game that we always wanted to play, is because we want that tension, that the battles, the confrontation, the trying to outthink the other person in the head to head, but also the kind of the puzzle of trying to make all your resources the most efficient they can be. And so it really manages to scratch both those itches. Mm-hmm. And about that mechanism, yeah. So that was the page that Sam sent through to me, the Google Doc that he sent through to me, was had this thing about the dice, and at the beginning we were like, okay, so you draft cards and then you place the dice on the card, and so that at the beginning it was like that. There were a couple of problems. One problem was if you're just paying that amount to the person. If a person puts a 6 and you're playing with 4 or 5 players, they just get a ridiculous amount of money. And there's just inflation of the economy, because maybe you gain money from harvesting and then you pay it to people, and you're only ever really paying other people. So that there's inflation. So that was one problem. And so we eventually, after, I don't know, maybe 6 months or something like that, realized that it could actually be done in a much more simple way of having the actions on the board in order and having tokens rather than dice. And the tokens have stayed with total values of 1 to 6. So that has stayed from the dice days. But the tokens have a value to pay to the player who places the token, and a value that has to be paid to the supply. So basically, there's added tax so that the economy doesn't inflate. And so that was how we resolved that, and that's how that mechanism transformed, but kept many of the same features that were intended.
I'm glad it took us a while to solve that problem, because in trying to solve the problem of the inflated economy, we actually came up with a faction who decided, actually, we're paying the bank completely for all of our actions. So Scaro, they can just neglect paying players, and they can pay all of their energy to the bank. And so they were a faction that, if they were in the game, they were taking energy out of the economy. So the battlefield that they fought on was the economical side. And so you really had to sort of change how you researched when you're facing Scaro, because you know you're getting less energy this game. And so it wasn't so much that you needed to go and beat down on them on the battlefield, but actually you need to try and boost up your economy to be able to deal with that.
Yeah, and so it's funny that you mentioned that, because I feel like so many times, at least in my experience, when something doesn't quite work, or you change it, and then sometimes you leave it in as like a special power, or like a little thing that, like, it's not in the main rules, but you can have like a say an item, or like, depending on the game, or like you said, a faction that actually utilizes that, so you can kind of keep those like early iterations, or like earlier stuff that has changed, but also it can help you while going through it to actually you use some of those things, which I think is really
yeah, definitely. I think some things got put on the shelf, they got taken back, they got transformed. Maybe they got put back on the shelf and then they got taken again to put into the game. Because I mean, luckily, there was never any time pressure. we presented the game to Shem when it was, I don't know, maybe after a year. I can't even remember how long it was. But once we had developed it a reasonable amount to be happy to show it to him and be like, hey, would you publish this? But even then, after he's like, yep, we still had heaps of time because of the Garfield Games schedule. So we actually continued developing the game, and I would say it was almost like maybe like 3 to 6 months of designing, and then like a year and a half, 2 years of developing, shall we say, which has been amazing because you think the game is ready. You're like, oh yeah, it's really good now, and then you find like an elegant solution that just makes it even better, or just perfects something that like was okay, you could accept it, but maybe just didn't quite feel right, and then like out comes this elegant solution, and you're like, oh man, that feels like how the game should be now. It feels more like the game, which has been a definite experience over the developing time.
What do you see as development versus initial design?
Well, that's a hard question because I would say the design was probably up until when we maybe showed it to Shem, because we were like, yeah, we have a game. And then after that, it was just refining those core concepts and make it better. But I guess sometimes in that development process, it is almost, they're kind of the same thing, but it's kind of hard to separate them. But sometimes the development is just tweaking, and then sometimes it's redesigning something. For example, the combat system, I think, took us quite a while to get right. Being one of the things that I think myself, I'm not sure about Sam, but it's one of the things that most disappoints me, I think, in area control games, just because they're not quite how I would like them to be. They're either too deterministic, so you already know what the result's going to be when you go into the battle, or else they're too random, so it's just like throwing some dice and hoping for the best. So we came up with the idea of trying to use cards and dice at the same time. So in our game, you have the option to play a card, or you can also not play a card, maybe. So units are worth strength, which is what determines who wins a battle. And you can add to the strength of your army a card, which will give you potentially strength. And you can also pay another resource, which is a gem, to be able to roll a dice, which is an average dice with 1 1, 2 2s, 2 3s, and a 4. So basically, there's a little bit of swing with the card and the dice that you can win battles that maybe the other person thought you couldn't. But a lot of that comes down to greed, which is actually really good. I'll explain why. Because if you lose a battle that you should have won, it's normally because you did not pay the gem or you did not play a card when you could have. So basically, it's your own greed of trying to win the battle without paying all those resources. So you're like, yeah, I can win this without the card. You don't pay the card and you lose. Well, that's your fault. You should have played the card. Like you could have secured that battle if you had played the card. Or from the other point of view, that person who maybe had the disadvantage, they're risking it. They're like, yeah, I think this person is probably going to not play a card, so I'm going to play a card, pay a gem, and try and get the win. And so generally when you lose a battle that you have an advantage in, it's your fault, which takes away that kind of like bad feeling of, oh, this game's just random, I should have won, I lost. No, you should have won, but you should have played better to win, you know? And so generally when things don't go your way, it's your own fault, or if I go into a battle with a disadvantage, for example, I was talking about how I often personally play is I roll the dice in quote marks, I roll the dice because maybe I go into a battle in the first round on top of Relic 1 where I have like a 1 or 2 strength disadvantage, and there I'm literally saying I know going into this battle that it's going to come down to the dice roll. So I already know that. I've accepted that as a fact. And I know that it could go badly, like it could go well. And maybe I know that my chance of winning is 30%, you know? So this kind of system I really like, because there's a lot of room for bluffing, for outplaying, but also when things go badly, it's generally your own fault. So there's not that feeling of this game is being unfair to me.
Yeah, and that's something which I feel was really strong, and to me that makes a lot of those battles memorable. Like I still remember that one battle where I went I went in to fight for a territory that had 0 units on it, only a building, and I think I went in with one of my like heroes, or like one of my what are they
Leaders.
leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. With one of my leaders, and I lost a battle to a building, and to me I thought that was quite funny. And like, first of all, it presented a situation which is like, okay, this can happen in this game, but then also I went in thinking, yeah, it has 0 attack power. I don't think they're gonna risk it, because another really cool dynamic that I find in the game is that you're usually gonna have more than one battle per round, so you're gonna need to choose which battles you want to be stronger in. What I mean by that is, like, first of all, which battles are you gonna pay resources for, but also because sort of the tiebreak in the game is the player whose turn it is to choose the battle. That means that you're gonna want to choose battles that it's not, again, you have the choice. Do I want to have the tiebreak in this, which so many times it comes down to that tiebreak in the game, so it's not just nothing, it's basically +1. So
yeah, it's a strategic consideration, totally. Yeah.
But to me, that made that battle memorable, because it wasn't just, oh, I'm gonna go in there, there's no units there, I'm gonna win this territory, it's gonna be helpful for me. It's like, I think I'm gonna win, but in the end I didn't, and that is one of those moments which, to me, I still have from like years ago from like other games, and I think when a game is able to create one of those moments, that's like really, really amazing.
Yeah. And that's the thing with the tiebreak as well, is that often, maybe if you lose on tiebreak, not always, but often it's your fault, because you could have picked that battle. Because as Ivan was saying, the tiebreak is who picks the battle. So there's everywhere that there's more than one faction in the same region, there's a battle in the battle phase. And it starts with the person who has the flare gun, which is the first player token. They pick a battle in which they are participating. And if there are more than one faction in the region with them, they pick who they're fighting. Now, they have the tiebreak. So if they finish with the same amount of strength, that person wins. Then you go to the person to their left, who then picks a battle that they are involved in. And you just keep going around until everything's solved. Generally, if there's a lot of battles, you'll be able to pick multiple times. So if you lose a battle, you might have had a chance to pick that, and then you lose it on tiebreak. And so, well, you could have won if you'd picked it yourself. So putting those the outcomes as much in the player's hands as possible, but leaving that element of chance, of a little bit of risk, of that roll of the dice, makes things not predictable as well. So it helps create those moments where maybe the person manages to win a battle which they thought they were never going to win because the other person didn't play a card,
Yeah, the combat phase is so dynamic when there are lots of battles going on. Like, there's little things like if you lose a building, you get a little consolation prize for losing your building, and the resources you get from that might actually help you to win the next battle. So maybe you want to throw that fight to lose the building so that you can win a fight that you've got your eyes on for later on. There's little things like redeploy. I mean, I won't go into all the details, but there's redeploy where you can move your troops into another region where there's about to be a battle, and you can really swing the tide of who's going to be winning that. So the combat order is super interesting in this game. And the other thing is the reason why we still actually enjoy playing it is because we haven't solved it. We haven't figured out the game. We haven't mastered it. I think there's a lot in the game mechanisms itself to kind of discover and to play around with, but then you add to that the people that you're playing against not only their asymmetric faction, but also them as a person, as a player, what they like to do. And different meta games will develop based on who's playing and who they're playing as, and
How people
and so
price the
it's
actions as well. Like,
yeah, it's just incredibly moorish, you know. It is a long game. I don't think we've said, but it's on average 3 to 4 hours. I mean, the more players, it's going to be slightly longer. But yeah, it's about a 3 to 4 hour game.
the first time you
And
play will be longer, definitely.
yeah,
And
we sort of wanted to make it sit in that sort of more than a normal Eurogame length and on the way towards Twilight Imperium. So people have this expectation that it is an epic game. It is more one of those afternoon games that you sit down, you know, you grab your snacks, you might have a through, you talk about how the first few rounds are going. It is one of those epic games. Yes, of course you can play it in the evening, but it's going to be a late one. So yeah.
I know that like if you have players prone to analysis paralysis, you've got so much choice in the game that it can, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that's like a double-edged sword when you want to have like for example that combat system, the rolling of the die, but also the card, but also do you spend resources to make yourself stronger? But which one do you choose? And when you present that to a player who actually wants to know all their choices, that can definitely add to it. But I guess that's also kind of knowing your audience, and when you're designing for yourself, you know that you're cutting players out always. But yeah,
We haven't had too many problems. There's been one or two players, but I think those players that have maybe had problems with the analysis paralysis just are generally prone to analysis paralysis, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But I have to say from our play tests, it's been pretty smooth even on the decisions front. Especially in a first game, I think people just need to be willing to lose as well, you know, if it's the first time you're playing a game. Unfortunately, when you're playing a complicated game, it's hard to go into it thinking that you're going to be like the master, because it's a learning process.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Talking about this analysis paralysis thing, there definitely is analysis paralysis, especially in the
combat
move
phase
and the combat phase, where they're really your decisions
And
are
the
really
move,
important there. But one of our goals was that for a battle game, we wanted, even if it was going to be long, say 4 hours, we wanted there to be next to no downtime, so people are really engaged. There are a lot of combat games that I've played where it's your turn and you have this long list of actions and all these things you can do, and you sort of run through this big list of things that you can do, and your turn is 15-20 minutes long, you know. Whereas in this, with the way that we stagger the phases throughout the rounds, everyone's sort of, it goes around in clockwise order. Each of the different actions, people get a chance to do them. So the most you're really waiting, and the other phases is, you know, a good 30 seconds to a minute. You know, it doesn't
it's
take
more
very
like
long.
it's more like on the Gaia project, Terra Mystica kind of, or like Paladins. You know, you take one action, then it's the next person's turn. And even with the battles, you choose one battle, and then it's the next person's turn to choose a battle. So you keep that rolling. I enjoy Root, but one of the things in Root that I get annoyed with is waiting for my turn to come back, because, you know, if you're playing with 4 or 5 players, you can wait a long time before you get to play again. Yeah, I think that comes out of how our personal taste as well. Sam can tell you that I love skipping other people's turns because I want to play mine. So,
And the other thing mechanically about that, I mean, Root's a great game. I won't talk about Root specifically, but if it is one of those, you take a million actions on your turn, then it goes round, the next person does that. The game state changes so much between your turns. It's just ridiculous, you know, and you don't really get a chance to respond to the player on your left because there's 2 more players that have done things. And so that's the other thing we wanted, was that, okay, actually we want turn order to be a little bit more dynamic, and that does happen with the way that the flare gun moves around. You know, you're not always after the player to your right. Sometimes they might be right at the start, and then you'll be at the end, that sort of thing, or the other way around. So yeah, there is that little bit of dynamic around turn order. It is always going to go clockwise, but who's going to be starting is going to change.
Yeah, and also that could take away the, like what you described of the game state changing so much between your turns. That's an issue that I've dealt with like multiple times, where you find it harder to plan for your next turn, and it's like when it comes around to your turn, you need to actually reevaluate the whole game state,
Yeah.
And it's really cool how you've dealt with it. How you can you're always kind of looking forward, and if you want, you do have a lot of information early on about. For example, in the earlier phase where you have those prices, you can think about which actions do I want to actually interact with this round? Like, do I want to skip something because it's too expensive, for example, or how much, you know?
Yeah.
So I do think that you're presenting players with some like visible information that they can kind of plan out whilst between turns.
Yeah, I would say 4 out of the 5 main action phases you can plan out. There's maybe just one thing, like if someone takes the special harvest token that you wanted, that could be one thing that would frustrate you. But there's not really anything else where someone can, once all the prices have been made, you can just math out your path to doing all the actions or doing the actions that you want. So definitely, yeah, that planning ahead. It's maybe just the move action where you have to wait to see what people do.
When you started the game, did you sort of go in with it with wanting it to be like an ambitious sort of playtime, or like that you want to have both like a strong economy side and like a strong combat oriented game?
Definitely.
I think yes to the second question. Yes, we wanted the strong economy and the strong combat, both of those things to be important. The first question, no, I didn't initially want a long game, but then if I answer the second question with a yes, then it has to be a long game because if you're doing economy and you're doing justice to a cool combat system, that's going to take time. Now, if you do half of each of those, then you're not going to have that payoff. Your economy is not going to get snowballing. You're not going to get online. You're not going to have all of those good feelings that kind of go with Eurogames when you are online, when your engine is purring. So we wanted time for that to develop, and then we also wanted time for people to bounce back from losing battles. If the game was a 2-hour game, losing in the first round could be devastating. But it's a 4-hour game, and you can bounce back after losing the first battle, and it is actually quite a forgiving game. Sure, you don't want to lose battles, but the game does sort of help you out. There is a little bit of rubber banding there, and there's time to sort of I don't know, readjust and plan what you're going to do after a loss, and yeah, you can still focus on your economy and get that rolling up again, things like that.
Yeah, I think the time thing was like a secondary consideration. I think probably maybe at the beginning we might have thought like, oh, we could maybe go to 3 hours, But at the end of the day, it was a secondary thing. Like we wanted the game to be the game that we wanted to play, and then obviously doing everything we can to reduce the time. But at the end of the day, I also loved the epicness of a Risk experience, like how it was a long game and things would change over the course of the game. Obviously, if I went back and played Risk, I'd probably get bored now. But so you have to be, if it's going to be a long game, if it's going to be 3 or 4 hours, people need to stay engaged. Like, I think that's the key. How can we, if the game is going to be 3 or 4 hours, how can we keep people engaged the whole time? Because if they get to the 2-hour mark and they're done, they're not going to enjoy the experience.
Something that I guess I kind of just mentioned in the beginning is, it shares a title with the first Circadians game, or it's part of that universe. Do you think it's for the same market, I guess, or do you think that people who enjoy that will enjoy this, or
yeah, that's a good question. Well, I like both of them, but that's like there's a lot of bias there. But no, I don't think they're very similar games. There's a few touches, kind of like my own signature, what I like to design in games. There's a few things like that. I love resource management, and resource management is huge in both of these games. I love asymmetry. In First Light, it's not quite as asymmetric, but it's still, there's variable player powers that are quite significant. They break the game in quite big ways. So there's that, and the theme and the art are very similar. Of course, it's they're brothers. But that was actually really one of our concerns, I guess. I don't know if it's a concern, but just that, how are we going to get this kind of marketing right? How are we going to get this game in the hands of the people that will enjoy this game? Because if you like First Light, you won't necessarily like this, and vice versa. If you didn't like First Light, that doesn't mean you won't like this, So,
but if you don't like any Garfield games up till now, maybe because you don't like Euros, you might actually like this one because it's different,
Yeah.
It's quite different to everything else that has come out from Garfield in some ways. And in other ways, it has a lot of the signatures there as well.
Yeah. So Shem, he likes to do his world building. I mean, he was the mastermind behind the North Sea, the West Kingdom. Like, he doesn't just design games; he designs worlds, and series and things like that. And so he really, with the Circadians, he wanted to expand even more so than what we did with the West. With the West Kingdom, there's 3 games that are Euro games. They're all different games. They're all, they all stand up on their own, but they are similar in sort of the space that they take up in your gaming kind of life. They're Euro games. They're not soup. There's a bit of interaction. They're a similar length of time. Similar weight, that similar kind of experience. I'm not going to say the games are that similar, but whereas with Circadians, he's happy to do like cooperative games, battle games, real-time games. He's quite open to actually making this quite a big world that can kind of put any game that he wants to publish into it. And so he was all about kind of building this world. And with Chaos Order now, we sort of feel like we know these factions a bit better. And when you go back to play First Light, you're like, oh, there's that leader, that leader that lost to the building in that fight, that Ivan lost that fight there. It sort of adds that flavor, adds that depth to the narrative, to the story. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me it sounds like I don't want to put like words in Shem's mouth at all, but it sounds like, because he's very restrictive with the West Kingdom, like one of the things is like they all need to be in the same box, and they do all need to kind of be similar, and you've got all the same characters, and the setting is very in one place, and maybe this is like kind of a way for him to try out something a little bit different, because I do think there's definitely it's got a different flavor to it, and also it's quite far thematically, where
it's a theme that people, basically the West Kingdom, people are excited for the South because they know that it will be those Euro games that they love. And I'm lucky enough to have played 2 of the South games, and they're really good, and I'm really excited for when they come out. But they are always even though they're different, they're using different mechanisms. Sam's mentioned it before. They're using dice in really interesting ways. They are still that resource manipulation, multi-use cards, lots of those Garfield things that you love, just in a new way, and it's Garfield games. Whereas I guess Circadians is just opening up to Sam, Shem. I'm in this game, luckily enough, designing it just to express any sort of type of game, as Sam was saying. I'm not sure there would ever be a Circadians party game, but hey, it could be social deduction, which we were talking about before we started recording. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, that could be kind of cool. I mean, I'm not the guy who comes up with all the Circadians ideas in terms of the world and where the story's going to go and stuff, but mechanically what I'm quite tied to is if they're all exploring a different facet of asymmetry. I think you can do that with cooperative. You can do that in all sorts of games, different weights as well. You could do a social deduction asymmetrical game. I mean, that's basically what they are.
Yeah.
So I really like that kind of mechanical hook that runs through them.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome kind of having that space, and
Yeah.
having something that you can expect to see in different forms, but also linked together.
Yeah, and I would say what you asked before about will people who like First Light like this game? Maybe not. But Shem, for example, when he decided to publish this game, he said clearly, he's like, this is not my sort of game. I don't like area control games. Like, I'm not big into them. Not that he doesn't like them, but he's not fussed. He doesn't feel he's good at them. I would say after he wrote the rule book, he just powered up and we played some playtests and he did super well. He understood what was going on and he said, no, I really like this game. And now he's keen to play it. Whereas before, he just probably wasn't that keen to play it very often.
Yeah, but
so there's an example of someone who maybe said, no, I don't like battle games, I don't like combat games, but actually he enjoyed this one. So also I would say give it a try or watch play videos when they come out. And if you think you like it, give it a try.
Yeah,
if you don't, that's fine.
And it's not, not that a lot of area control games are just area control, but as I kind of see it, and I've told you this before, I kind of see it as two almost separate games that are linked together in their resources and kind of position. But like there's a big chunk of the game that isn't area control, and then you've got a big chunk of the game which is. So I do think that, like at least for me,
and they're both fundamental. That's the thing. They're both fundamental to winning the game. You can't win the game with one or the other.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's what makes like that's what I like in an area control game. I don't think I really like only area control games. Like recently, I played a War of Whispers, which I thought was like probably one of the best pitches for a game like ever, because it's an area control game where you're not playing any of the factions. Have you guys had the chance to play it by any chance?
I really want to try it. It looks stunning. The production was amazing. I
would love to play it as well. I've never had the chance yet.
Yeah, but I think like that is kind of what I really like in an area control game, which is, yes, it's area control, but also there's kind of got to be like a little twist or a little something else, just so that it's not, kind of only dudes on a map. And I think like I don't know, that game had me kind of mind blown just with the area control, but you're not playing the factions. You kind of want some factions to win, but you can change around the board, but everybody actually has access to all factions. I thought that was awesome. Definitely recommended. But I think yeah, for Sham, I'm guessing it does actually have a lot of that Euro-iness, especially in that like first part of the game, how to kind of optimize, what to research, how many resources, like what do you want to get stronger at, what are the other players doing, because also like you can see that if somebody's not like doing really well or getting ready for the second phase enough, you can kind of try and step on their toes. Or so many times in this game, I feel like I've also I've not anticipated players' turns. Like I would think this player is definitely going to be attacking this turn, and then they don't, and then I set myself up to respond to a move that doesn't happen, which is always fun.
That's the beauty of playing with different players. We can't read their minds, and you have to adapt to this new challenge. I just love playing with different players. And we've been doing a bit of playtesting online, and it's been so fun just watching how people intuitively play this game. And I will say that no one has played anything, and I don't actually know what a perfect game looks like, but no one has played anything close to a perfect game on their first play. And to me, that's really cool to see, because you don't need to play a perfect game to win. And there's this kind of, I think I talked about it on our podcast maybe a year ago or something, Ivan. The pursuit of mastery is something that I love in games, where you play a game and you enjoy it and you say, there are things to learn here. I want to improve at this game. There are things that I didn't see the first time that now I understand a little bit better now, having played. And people have the chance to pursue mastery of this game. They have the chance to really learn, because there is a lot to learn, and there is a lot of ways that you can improve and adapt to what other players are doing. So seeing people play for the first time has been really, really cool to see how they go about it. There are some people who are super scared. They don't want to fight. They just sit in their little area and they turtle. And, sometimes you can do okay with that. Some factions can turtle well, and others just go for broke. They don't care about their economy. They're just going to blow it all on war. And war is expensive in this game. If you fight too many battles, you're going to get bankrupt pretty quickly. That's cool to see.
What are your plans for the future? I guess, Zach, I want to know that more from you because it is kind of new for you. And like Sam now is doing this full time. But what would you say this experience was? How cool was it that somebody who you're friends with kind of helped you out in it, and how was this experience for you?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience, I have to say. Like, seriously, Sam took me under his wing and taught me heaps of stuff, and then he'll just tell you that it's everything, like it's stuff that Shem taught him, so he's really humble. But
It's almost the
but
Padawan system.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, because I really enjoy board games. I was starting to try and develop some ideas, and then Sam came up with this offer. So I work full time, so obviously, I don't have heaps and heaps of time for game design, but so I can't work on too many things, too many different projects at the same time. But Circadians Chaos Order has taught me so much just about game design. And I see that now, like, I remember I play tested one of your games, Ivan, recently. And I was able to give some, I think, good feedback. And it was all stuff that came from this experience of learning from Sam. And so when I see like a prototype, I have better ideas of like what needs to change to actually make it into an enjoyable game, because we all know that like often first prototypes are not very fun. So going forward, who knows, there could be other stuff in the Chaos Order game, and I have some other game ideas, and also with Ivan, with you actually, we've been working on something together. I just me and my wife had our first child. My daughter was born a couple of weeks ago now, so that's also makes things different for time to dedicate. But yeah, hopefully this first game will be well received, and who knows, it might open up other opportunities in the future. I definitely am more on the shall I say area control side of things in my taste of creating games and conflict. And I think that is maybe something that made this working with Sam really good, because I kind of wanted to make the game a little bit more aggressive, and he was maybe trying to make it a bit more, toned back. And so we managed to also strike a good balance there. And so definitely other projects that I have in my head also kind of involve or area control or some sort of direct conflict. So that's definitely the kind of thing that I enjoy, and I enjoy designing. So maybe if I have the chance to bring out any other games, they will probably be on that sort of line, but maybe not. Who knows?
So what you're saying is every time that someone gets a reward for losing or compensation in this game, they can thank me.
Basically.
Otherwise, they would have nothing if it was just you.
No, I think the one that I like. I mean, lots of the stuff was just like Sam being like, "Teach me," man, being like, but you can't have players feeling too bad. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. But I am also kind of the deal with it guy. But one of the things I loved, which we took out of the game, but I really liked it, was that Draic, who is one of the factions that they have to hunt down other people's leaders, and they have to defeat their leaders. So they used to, when they defeated a leader, just take that leader from the player and place it onto their player board. And it's like, you can't have that leader anymore. And that was like, they had to collect 4 of them or 5 of them to win the game. And I really enjoyed that kind of asymmetric, like they completely changed the game because they just took away one of your leaders. But then Sam was like, yeah, but it feels pretty bad. And so we ended up changing it so that they just gained a point when they defeated a leader, and the player gets the leader back so they can buy them again. So it's more like the leader is being humiliated in battle and needs to be you need to convince them to go out and fight again. So that's an example that's an example of my brutality. But hey, who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah. No, I think that's like first of all the playtest that you mentioned. I think it was super helpful from you, and it's like you can definitely see when somebody has like the experience because of the way like I can tell you from that playtest probably 90%, maybe 100% of the issues that you mentioned were were actually implemented, and you just caught on to like so many things, and I think it was mainly because you just get into a different mindset, and just because
Yeah.
the same game we also have taken to like people who only play games, and
Mm.
the problems I don't think are as easily identified,
Yeah.
because like a lot of times people will propose solutions but they won't
Yeah. Yeah.
realize
They
what
propose solutions. Yeah, that's one thing that I learned from Sam and from Shem as well is when you're playtesting someone's thing, don't propose solutions. Just talk about the issues. And
Mhm.
so that's what I tried to do with you, and I think it was helpful. Yeah.
It was super helpful, and I think like without that playtest, I think I felt like that playtest took our game where it would be like in a month for like a week. So it was really helpful.
Thanks,
Um,
man.
This Zach
Yeah, and
guy's a bit
that's
of a gaming genius, eh? Just my
well,
hidden gem.
it's just Sam and Shem's experience, man, and having this chance to learn from them. But they really know their stuff, and I love just hanging out with them and playtesting their games as well because we just have a lot of fun together.
what was it like working together? As in, what was your kind of schedules like? You had a full-time job. How much
I
time did you
also
get?
live in Italy. I also live in Italy, and Sam lives in New Zealand. We're both Kiwis,
Yeah,
um,
there's a time difference.
and so there's a time difference. Like it's either 10 to
10
12
to
hours,
14
depending
hours,
on
isn't it?
yeah,
Oh, 10 to 12.
10
Yeah.
to 12, depending on daylight saving. So in the first year and a half, I was like my work hours were way more flexible, and so often it was my mornings and Sam's evenings. Um, but recently, and at that time, Sam was working full time, so it actually worked really well because he wasn't full time designing. So my mornings were his evenings when he was free, and then he went into full time game design the same year that I ended up getting a different job where my hours are office hours, and so now it's my evenings uh, and his mornings, which works perfectly for him as well. So it actually worked out really well in terms of hours. Obviously, like we have to find the space and whatnot, but it's gone pretty well.
And with the game being kind of this long, do you would you play entire games? Because what I've found a lot of times, especially early on in the design process, like right now, um, where we're at with a game, like right now we're playing mostly full games just because it's like important to the game. But would you play entire games, or would you sort of play to a point and then like realize the things that haven't gone well so far, like identify some problems and then kind of try and fix them and then again, or would you more go in? Because what I really liked about playtesting with you guys and what I feel like I learned was kind of play the game as if it's a finished like game and just do full kind of just experience the game, and then maybe you can talk about it. But like I've never felt with you guys that it was like brainstorm while you play. But I'm
Yeah,
assuming
Yeah.
like early on,
Sam
it's
always
probably
shuts
different.
me up when I start brainstorming during a play test. He's like, "No, wait till afterwards," and I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
It's funny because, you know, I actually do that with other games, brainstorm mid game. But this, it just feels like it's so immersive. It's such a, I don't know, such a rich. It's not like a thematic game, I guess. Like it's such a rich kind of. You're engrossed in what's happening on the map, what's happening with the factions. You don't want to stop and brainstorm. And I think this goes back to the question you asked earlier about, what's design, what's development. And I think my answer to that is that development is when you're actually having fun with the game, when the game is playable and it's enjoyable, and it's not just like there are problems, but it's not super apparent what the problems are. And so when we were developing, we were just sitting there playing the game with friends, enjoying the game. And we were really lucky to have people like you, Ivan, and there was a crew of people from Australia, Spain, New Zealand, who would be up early morning or late night playtesting with us. And
yeah,
we just
also
enjoyed
Italy
playing
during the
game.
lockdown as well.
Yeah, and Italy as well. Yeah. We just enjoyed playing the game. And I would be making, and Zach would too, we'd be making mental notes as to what was going down that was wrong, but also where we thought people were misplaying. And so if someone did a really big misplay, we might say, okay, maybe it's not the faction that's weak. There might be something intuitively that's going on here that we can, adjust with graphic design or a clearer rules teach or something like that. But we would just enjoy playing the full game out. And then afterwards, we would stay up for another hour or two, sending voice messages and typing in notes and, theory crafting. And often I would be thinking about it in my sleep, and I would wake up and write a whole document of things to change. But it was a little bit different for two-player games. And Zach and I did quite a few two-player games where we would stop at the end of round 2 or round 3 and said, cool, this faction's clearly going to win. Or, cool, we don't know who's going to win, but we've seen what we needed to. This interaction between these two factions, something was wrong there. Something felt oppressive, things like that. So we felt like we could stop at two-player, but with higher play count, we were just enjoying the game too much.
sorry, can I?
Yeah, you go for it.
About the two-player. Part of the two-player thing is the fact that it was just us two designers. So maybe we felt a bit freer to just be like, yeah, we can stop. If you're with other people, you want them to get the satisfaction of finishing the game and seeing who wins, But the other part is also that two-player, by definition, is a bit more like a chess game, right? And chess, people at a certain point, they surrender because they're like, yep.
Yeah, it's
because everything that
surrender, actually.
everything that you win is a loss for the other person. Whereas if you're in more players, if you win against one person, the other person didn't lose anything, and maybe they attack you next. So everyone balances.
Yeah, zero sum. Yeah.
So definitely, this is something I really enjoy, the two-player in our game, but it is always a two-player. Two-player in combat games are always going to be a little bit more cutthroaty for this reason. So maybe not after round 2, but definitely after round 3 or 4, if someone hadn't won the game, we could normally be like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to win now. I surrender, basically. But it also allowed us to get through more play tests as well. And I would say, the good thing about the asymmetry in this game, and that helps with the two-player as well, because maybe in some other asymmetric games you can't play two-player with all the factions. This one, there's a lot of asymmetry, but all the factions play on the same action phases. They all play with the same actions. So the asymmetry is about, breaking the rules of the game, not creating entirely different rule sets. So that means that at two-player, you can play with any combination of factions and enjoy all those different matchups, and they'll all feel quite different.
And we would sort of theory craft, this interaction, say AI and Oxytea, this is going to be really Oxytea favored or really AI favored. And we would theory craft and then we would be proven wrong. Yeah. And we were like, okay, is this just surprisingly more balanced than we ever intended? We sort of thought that two-player, we sort of thought it would almost be impossible to get two-player right, where every faction has a good chance of winning. I'm not going to say every faction has 50% in every matchup. I mean, that's probably just not true, but it's close enough where, everyone with good play has a chance to beat any of the unique opponents. Even with potentially hard matchups, it's still winnable.
Yeah.
There
Everyone
are
has
enough avenues
tools
you
to
can
deal
explore.
with it.
Yeah.
Everyone has some sort of tools, even if they're in what you would think is a hard matchup because of the core identity of the faction. but then they have tools maybe to actually deal with the other faction. Maybe it's one of their leaders who is actually quite effective, or so that's what we found is we're thinking, yeah, it's going to be really hard for this faction, and then we were surprised. So it's nice being surprised by your own game as well.
And this is one of like Shem's things is he wouldn't want to create a whole new game mode with all these different pieces to try and fix 2-player.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just wouldn't want to do that. He's all about streamlining. He's all about, producing the best product that is at an affordable price range that doesn't have all this fluff in the box.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we don't really need to add components for 2-player was a happy accident. There's 2 pricing tokens that we add in for 2-player for each faction. It's just about not having too bloated an economy.
Yeah, and also I think, sorry for interrupting. I think that in area control games, usually what you need to do with like various player counts is just shrink the map so that players are forced to like fight more for resources and stuff like that. Which I think you've got a form of that where in like larger player counts you can the map becomes you can basically teleport around the map and it's even bigger. But I think that's like one of the things that you've done to address that as well, right?
Yeah, totally right. And actually, that's something that, to be fair, Shem mostly designed the map.
The map was hard.
Yeah, the map was really hard. And
we changed it about 3 or 4 times, I think.
Yeah, initially it was Zach's beautiful paint drawings.
Let's not bring those out.
Yeah, Microsoft Paint.
Nice. That's what the pros do.
Yeah, totally. And Shem and I and Zach, we had lots of discussions about how we could get this map working because we knew everything else was working, but it was quite hard to test the game knowing we weren't on a finished map for so long. Knowing that the board would be better, in terms of like adjacencies and who you can get to and where you can be safe, because we sort of want a few areas that are like Australia and Risk, not that bad, but sort of like some areas that are closed in,
asymmetric map, shall we say?
Yeah, they can turtle exactly.
Yeah. I think this is kind of on another note, but it's what I mentioned before we started about kind of a game I'm helping out a little bit with playtesting and development, and like I think one of the big issues that you've solved that I saw there, I'm not going to mention the game name, I guess, but was that when you spawn units, they always spawn in your base, and you kind of have to maneuver them so that they go out. So you in that way in Circadians, the way that why it works, why I think that's better for the game is that the specific problem there was in an area control game. You'd be able to just spawn on a space where there's already conflict. Whilst here you kind of have the threat, but you also have that resource of movement, and you kind of force your units to move around, and you have a pinning mechanic, so that I think that really adds to the map itself, and movement I feel like becomes more of a puzzle. How do I get to where?
Yeah, because we had a couple of problems to solve, right? Because we don't want people, because really early on in the game we just had these we called them meme squads, because it was just like chuck all your units in one territory and just move them all as a big blob and win battles. And we're like, we don't want the game to be like that. Yeah. I mean, it's still possible. You can still do that. Sometimes it's good, but it's really situational now. We want it to be important to control territory, and that you need your units out there to control territory. But we also, obviously it's also important to win battles. You need to have units in those battles. If you're able to spawn, I mean, it would never happen that you could spawn into conflicts in the order of our rounds. That could never happen. But if you can spawn onto the map where you already have units, there's the potential to snowball way too quickly, because maybe you've got a really strong army out there and it just becomes stronger without you having to spend really anything. So how our one works is you do have to move your guys off base. You have to use one of your movement points, which are really precious, moving your guys off base and getting them to your big army. So if your army's out there in the field, we have some ways, some buildings that help you kind of like teleport out, get deployed with one movement point to those buildings, which are further away. But yeah, it kind of avoids that fact of a snowballing powerful army. And also the pinning was to solve this thing about just having a massive glob which runs around. Like, you get units pinned according to how many units the other player has. So if you want to run over to that region 3 spaces away and you're running through other armies, well, you've got to leave units along the way, and you're going to end up with a smaller army when you get to where you actually wanted to go. And you're going to have to fight all the battles for where you ran through. So it took a while, but eventually we kind of got to the point where it didn't feel like the strategy was just to make a glob of units, nor did it feel like the strategy was just to have 2 or 3 units on each region. Like, there's kind of that balance of, yes, I do want to have a strong army in battles that are important to me, but I don't want to leave my regions completely undefended because people will come and punish me.
Yeah. And the other thing that pinning solved was moving last was so important, and it still is really important because you could respond to where all the other battles were going to be, because battles aren't resolved until everyone has moved. You can see where there's going to be battles before they've taken place. So moving last to respond was really, really crucial. But now, if you're moving first, it's not so bad with the pinning rule, because now you can lock people in. You're saying, hey, with those units there, they don't get the chance to respond. They're forced to stay here with me because we're fighting. And so that allows for the first player to make some really cool strategic moves to sort of prevent the other player from having much sort of flexibility in their response. So sometimes you actually want to, when you price the move action, you can price move first or move last. You can decide, do I want to move first or do I want to move last? And sometimes you strategically go move first. You take the initiative. You get to the spots you want to. You block other people getting there with a full force, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that goes back to, I guess, that pricing mechanic. And again, another interesting bit is how you as the game designer aren't solving for the players. You're not saying first player always gets more than the last player, or the opposite. It's like you can kind of decide in that pricing phase. Do you want your advantage to actually be movement, and do you want to have perfect information, or do you want to, which is moving last, or do you want to move first? So it's again yet another place where you're giving players that choice, I think.
One of the things with giving players choice is we love agency in games, and there's a real tension here actually between my design philosophy, which is agency, give players choice, sandbox, I love that sort of thing, and asymmetry, because traditionally, really, if we think about it, asymmetry is not the player making choices, but the designer making choices for the player. And the designer is basically saying, here's the path you have to go down. And so Zach and I really wanted asymmetry in this game, but we also want agency. Like, can we have both? Can we have our cake and eat it? And one of the ways we do this is with the unique cards that each faction gets. They have 3 leaders generally, and they have 3 attributes. The leaders, we've spoken a bit about them. They have combat strength and stuff like that, and they also have ways they break the rules, and then them specifically on the regions they are. And then there's the attributes. The attributes are the rules that you get to break, different ways that you get to do things cool.
And there's also a building.
Yeah, there are buildings. There's also unique buildings. But when players get the chance to deploy these leaders, they pick which one they want. So there's a little bit of agency there with the asymmetry. They decide which of these 3 leaders do I want to deploy first, that sort of thing. And then with the attributes, they can upgrade them over the course of the game. And so their special abilities get stronger. But the player, again, they get to decide which of the attributes they want to get stronger. So this was us just giving a little bit more power back into the hands of the player while still having the beloved asymmetry that we so dearly wanted.
Is there things that you still see as problems even at this point? Because I mean, I think this is something that we talked about last time with you, Sam, about kind of getting a response from players and then just nodding your head. I seem to remember you saying that. I hope that I don't misremember it about kind of. But also the problem of just having to call it at one point like this is a finished game. Did you know at one point like this is good enough to publish, or right now do you think there's still basically when you've gotten to this point where it's going to be published and you're finalizing things, do you still have those moments of I kind of want to still change that, and because it's really not done until you decide it's done, and how did you kind of decide that?
I hate this moment. I hate this moment where we have to say it's done.
Yeah.
I'm just not good with it because I love to keep tweaking, and you know what? With the game like this, Chaos Order, I could be tweaking for another year.
Eternity, man.
Honestly,
it's like League of Legends. They patch it, right, and they tweak all the champions every so many months, right? It's almost the same thing where it's like after you see a large amount of games, maybe that leader could be one attack more, like to be perfect, to be completely balanced, maybe, but you can't do that. Sam did change a leader quite recently, slightly.
Yeah, and that's a really good point with League of Legends. So many video games they get patches, they get DLC, all this sort of thing, and they can fix their issues. With board games, we just have to release something and hope that it's okay. Like it's just not fair. We can't do patches.
No,
we can't
there's
do
second prints that fix things. Like recently, there was Through the Ages. I seem to remember.
Yeah, but it has to already be successful.
It does, you don't have that second chance.
If you make a big mistake, you're not going to get a second edition.
Yeah. So like kind of tongue in cheek, like I would keep working on this forever, but at the same time, I'm really happy with the state of the game. I'm seeing so many factions win on their unique conditions. I'm seeing the global win condition happening. Like not a little bit surprised, but the game meta of new players is quite different from our meta. And so then the design question is, well, do you balance around experts or do you balance around new players? Because if new players play the game and they tend towards a certain meta, they might think the game's unbalanced. In that meta, it might not be balanced. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then you have this thing in design about like high skill ceilings and high skill floors, low skill floors, that sort of thing. What are you aiming at? Are you aiming at the most balanced game for players who have played it 20 times? Or are you aiming at the most balanced game for the first play, what people intuitively would do? And there's not actually a clear answer, because if you go straight for the 20 plays, the people who are really, really experienced, then they might not ever get there.
Yeah.
And so it has to actually be somewhere in the middle. It really does. It has to be somewhere in the middle where players can play it for the first time and think it's balanced enough.
Yeah.
And as they get to play the game, they realize, oh, this is what this faction can do to counter that. And they start picking up these other, little skills and things to do. And so, when I do the tweaking, I'm often tweaking for my game meta and what I think is strong, the way that we play the game. But that might not be the case for someone playing the first time.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that, like, the things that we've changed over probably the last 8 months, this year, 2021, have pretty much only been slight tweaks to faction power, just trying to get them as balanced as possible. The core stuff of the game, for a long time, we've been really happy with it. And so when you think about that, like, yes, the game is ready. Like Champions on League of Legends, it's really hard to completely balance really asymmetric factions, and we think we've done a really good job at it. But when you publish the game, it goes out into people's hands, and maybe there's like maybe we've played the game, I don't know, 50 times. But, when maybe thousands and thousands of people start playing it, there'll just be so many plays of the game and such a larger...
Yeah, things will pop up.
Yeah, maybe. I hope not. But I think we'll probably get lots of messages on BGG where people feel that things aren't balanced. I hope not. But it's likely to happen in a game like this, because it's definitely a game where sometimes we've played it with people and they go, "Oh, this isn't balanced," and because we know the game well, we're like, "Yes, it actually is." But I'm sorry that you feel that way. but yeah, I think that's just part of releasing a game as well.
Oh yeah.
But we're really happy with the game. We're happy with the core mechanics. We're happy with the factions, and we're excited to release it and see what people think, and if people enjoy it, we're happy.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting line when kind of that first experience versus the experience of the designer, who's presumably and hopefully had like hundreds, if not like over 1,000 hours with the game, because a lot of times, and the thing is that sometimes you do need to address those things if you keep hearing the same thing and you're like, no, it's not, but then then you may need to like think about it. But sometimes I don't know, it's I think that's a really, really good point that you brought up, Sam, with just who are you catering to, and who do you want this game, like do you want somebody to kind of go in really deeply with this game, or and it's not an or, it's also an and, because you can still make a good first. I'm not saying that the first impression needs to be like a lot more difficult or a lot different, but I think that's really, really important, and to just kind of learn and how to address those things. I think a really good example of that to me is like Stonemaier Games with their games, how they kind of how they lead you into the experience with like even like a little strategy guide, or like if you don't know what you're doing, try doing these things. Like I remember in Scythe, it's like try building up to do a second act to be able to afford playing a second action, and I think that is a really good way to do it, because I remember my first games of Scythe, because Scythe might be a game that I've played more than any other game, and it's only because it was one of my first ones in my board game collection, and I spent so much more time with it because I didn't actually go on to like buy a lot more games. I didn't have like game groups and stuff. But in Scythe, I seem to remember my first plays. I would build up all my workers, and I'd travel around with like 8 workers or whatever the limit was. I think it's 8. And every time I do the produce action, it'd be like I'd have to pay all the resources, because that's how they've kind of balanced it out. But that's changed. Like it's a game where like 5 games in, it changes. You see, okay, that's not a good strategy actually. But
yeah, because it works in all the other Euro games. Just get more workers, right? And
Yeah.
then you come and play Scythe, and you get taxed all this popularity and like military strength. What's this all about?
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think that's something that it's definitely worth at least thinking about a little bit, or at least knowing. And I think it's great that you're going in doing all these playtests with different people, because if I remember correctly, I don't know if it was when I talked with you or with Shem, but you said with like the West Kingdom games, you do most of your playtesting just together, like in house, and you get experienced. I think you said that with like Architects, you didn't only like build a lot, and then when you saw groups building a lot, that would like shorten game length a lot, because that's kind of the end game.
No, yeah, that's totally right. With Architects, yeah, there was like the cathedral strategy was a sort of one that we would do from time to time, and we noticed that some groups, 3 or 4 people were racing up it, and the game was just so much shorter. Yeah. And at the end of the day, if they want to play the game that way, they can. It's just a faster game.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like the game being shorter, but what I do like is the threat of it being shorter. Do you know what I mean? I like exactly the tension of it could end any moment. Now, I don't want it to end any moment, but it could. And then that sort of stress kind of forces you to make some decisions around, well, am I cutting corners here? Am I going to get to do everything I want to do? Which thing am I going to leave out? Or am I going to be greedy and miss out on those points, miss out on building that last building? So that variable end time is something we like to do in our games. But back to the kind of the question that led to that was, yeah, a lot of our testing, Shem and I, for the West Kingdom was pretty much just Shem and I, Paladins and Viscounts in particular. We did so much of the testing, and Shem did heaps solo as well. With this game, it's just, I mean, there is interaction in those games, but it's inherently interactive. There are so many points of interaction. Even the Euro elements, you know, with the pricing and all those sorts of things. It's just, there's so many points of interaction. So we needed to see lots of different players play the game. And we weren't necessarily looking to them to tell us how to fix it, but we wanted to see what they wanted to do, what they would tend towards, just to kind of catch every play style possible from all of our future players.
Yeah, I think that might actually be like Zach's contribution from the outside looking in, that much player interaction, because Zach, you said that.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I love player interaction. That's why Architects is my favorite of the West Kingdom. I know lots of people like, oh, Paladins is a much superior game, or or Viscounts is. I really like Viscounts as well. That could actually surpass it for me. But I love the interaction in Architects, because when we were playtesting it like 4 games in a row, you were looking at what other people were doing. Like, for example, the Cathedral strategy. If you see one person has the advantage there, you go, okay, sure, you can lose 5 of your workers straight away. I'm going to build buildings which are worth more points. So if you can't manage to finish the game, I'm going to get more points than you, So it's about like looking at what other people are doing and countering that. And I really enjoy like not just the solitaire. Like, I do enjoy that as well, but I love the games where you're not just playing, multiplayer solitaire, but you're actually like looking at what other people are doing and responding to what they're doing as well.
Yeah, and I can definitely also see that threat. I definitely see that in the relics of the of Circadians, the threat that it could end with those two conditions, which is your condition or like the area control condition.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And also, like a game like Side that we talked about, the combat, I think what I like about that system is exactly the same thing, because you don't do, it's not a combat game, but you have the threat of combat, and you have the threat of if you have like high power, and people do look at that, and that's what I think is like really cool there. Is you're probably gonna have like 1 or 2 combats happen in that game, and usually it's gonna be towards the end. But the whole time you're kind of looking, okay, how much power does the other player have? And maybe you're building up your power just to kind of look tough, or like look like, so the people don't want to mess with you.
Totally, I love that too.
Yeah. What games are you guys sort of playing now? Or I know, Sam, you're working on a ton of projects. Yeah. What are you guys playing, and Sam, what are you kind of working on now that you're full time? Because you weren't full time last time you were on the podcast.
Nah, I don't think I was full time. No, I think I was doing 1 day a week. So yeah, I'm full time now. I'm spending a lot of time on Tabletop Simulator. So we're putting lots of our kind of prototypes on there, Garfield Games ones. So Shem and I are working on the first 2 South games in the trilogy of South games. So there will be more info on that coming quite soon, I think, actually. But that's been going pretty well. We also, alongside Chaos Order, Circadians First Light is having a 2nd edition. So that's to sort of make the artwork match a bit better. Sam has really, really done an amazing job with Chaos Order, and he did a great job with First Light as well. But we're wanting to make it feel like it's the same world, and so the art needs to change to match the art of Chaos Order. So we're doing a 2nd edition, and with the 2nd edition, I was given the chance to tweak things and I love tweaking things. So I've been testing the solo mode, getting it right because the game is actually one round shorter. So it's going to be a faster game, but players start with more resources, so they get more done. So there's just that same level of satisfaction in less time. So it's a big win in my books. But I needed to fix the solo mode because they weren't tuned to play one round less. So I'm doing that. I'm working on Chaos Order, working on expansions for West Kingdom games. So Works of Wonder's just been on Kickstarter. City of Crowns is fulfilling from Kickstarter. And then we've got 2 Viscounts expansions coming out next year. And then all my other projects I cannot talk about.
The other 30 projects.
No, I'm not. I'm actually not doing that many more. I mean, when I put it like that, it sounds like a lot, but a lot of it is kind of development work. Just expansions and tweaks for different games and things like that. But not
Well, like
heaps of new designs.
The first 2 South games are already like at a really good point, and they have been for a while. So that's development, really.
Yeah.
And in terms of what games I'm playing, apart from my own, I have been spamming Terra Mystica on Board Game Arena. There's like a bit of a scene on Discord and stuff, and there's a really cool community of people that just love Terra Mystica. So I've been enjoying just getting like absolutely whooped by these pros, but getting to know them, it's been really cool. And I think I'm actually going to be on a Terra Mystica podcast this week.
Whoa. And
I'm probably going to be the worst Terra Mystica player who's ever been on that podcast. So that's going to be fun.
So I have been playing. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time, so I've mainly been playing Chaos Order and the South games on Tabletop Simulator, and got smashed by One Deck Dungeon with my friend the other day. Smashed by that game, wrecked us in the face. And apart from that, I've been playing some Football Manager on the computer. It's not a board game, but it's a nice time pass. So I quite enjoy it, and it's something I can play by myself, and like I can play silently as well when my wife and child are sleeping. So yeah, mainly Garfield games actually. Just mainly testing because I enjoy spending time even virtually with Sam and Shem, and sometimes my younger brothers get in on their tests as well.
Yeah, awesome. I almost feel sometimes like it's 2 separate hobbies, like designing games and playing games.
Spot on.
Yeah,
it is. It really is. Yeah.
I would love to be able to play more games, and I was like the last when there was the pandemic, it kind of made things difficult. But I used to go to my local board game cafe and play with the owner and learn new games. But recently, for different reasons, I don't have very much time. So
what are your kind of? I usually ask for advice to new game designers.
I would say, like, if you have the chance in some sort of way to learn from people who have experience and have published games, I think there's just so many things that it's learning from like books and reading and online and whatever. There's only so much you can learn. Whereas when you're actually you're getting real advice, you're doing stuff with people, there's so much that you can absorb. And so I would say if you have that chance, if you know some people, try and pick up as much as you can from them. And other than that, yeah, like one of the things I struggle with the most is believing in my games. And I think this process showed me that the first prototype is always going to be bad. Like it's almost never going to be any good. So just believe in it and keep working on it.
Awesome.
Unless your name is Vlada Shvlatil and you just design code names,
Yeah.
and then spend 3 months trying to fix it and realize that it was perfect. I mean, that's what I've heard. Anyway, I'm just sharing what I heard. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's similar. It's similar with like Bruno Cathala. When I talked to him, he said that like he spends like a bunch of time thinking about a game, and then his first physical prototype just works. Like, okay.
Yeah. What a freak. I love it. It's so good.
Yeah. Sam, you got anything before we finish up?
Yeah, I think I might have even said this last time, and this is probably just the other side of the coin that Zach is sharing. I would say find someone else to work with, and if you're an experienced designer, maybe find someone who isn't experienced and who has that spark, who has that fresh idea, who something about Zach which was really cool is he just caught the vision. Like we didn't need to explain too much what we wanted. We both just wanted the same thing, and maybe that's quite rare. It's the same also with me and Shem with the Euro games that we design. We just want the same thing from our games, and I just have so much fun working with friends designing games. I find it way more enjoyable than working on my own. We bounce ideas off each other. I get told that I'm wrong all the time, and I often will say that someone else is wrong as well. But you just learn so much from someone else, and when you realize that you're on the same team and you want the same thing from your game, then the feedback is just awesome. It's just such a cool way to improve. And also, like, fixing problems together is great as well, because you have the different kind of ways that people think and solve problems, and that allows you to be quite creative with the ways you fix things in games. So this has been an absolute blast, and as you said, like, the hobby designing a game is different from playing the game, and this has been a really enjoyable experience. I don't know when Zach and I are going to design another game together. Who knows? It's got to start with a spark. It's got to be like, this is the next thing. This is like what we've always wanted to play, part 2. I don't know, but yeah, I would say find someone to work with. If you're anything like me, you'll enjoy it so much more.
Yeah, awesome. That's awesome. That's the Padawan system.
Yeah,
Star Wars got it right.
Yeah, so if Shem is Qui-Gon, then I'm Obi-Wan, and Zach is Anakin.
So I must turn evil at some point and make like evil Ameritrash games that make everyone hate each other.
You betray
right?
Garthel.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for the time, and I can't wait for Circadians Chaos Order to come out.
Thanks, Ivan. It's been great chatting with you. It's always awesome to chat with you. Thank you.
Thanks, man.